The year is 2965, when the story of Arinor, son of Balis, began. Arinor was just an infant when Smaug came to Laketown and burned it to the ground in 2941. His father perished in that attack. The only thing to survive was his father's blade, which seemed untouched by Smaug's searing flames. Arinor grew up, following in the steps of his father, becoming a guard, then a captain within the forces that protected Laketown. But visions in the night drove him to leave Laketown behind, for he feared evil was on the rise again, and he swore he would never be unprepared like Laketown had been so many years ago. Pippi Bunce is a young hobbit scholar who has heard the tales of Bilbo Baggins and Smaug, and realized the world is much bigger outside the garden walls of Crickhollow. She yearned to learn more, and was accused of having took blood for such thoughts. She is the heart, the light, and the hope of the company, her spirits never diminishing even in the darkest of shadow. She always finds a light, and always finds hope. Terendal, daughter of Isulin, is an elven warden. Her beauty hides her true age, but she has hinted and spoken of times long ago. She became a warden because she sensed a growing shadow, like ghostly fingers clutching at the edges of her mind. She is weary and untrusting of everyone, even sometimes questioning her own friends. Of those gathered, the one she knows the most is Vidar Greystone. Vidar is a treasure hunter, seeking an ancient heirloom that once belonged to his family and had been stolen many generations ago. Vidar doesn't even know what it is that he's looking for, but he's certain he'll know once he does find it. His hair and beard are gray, a trait that has existed in his family for generations. He is extremely talkative and friendly, much to Terendal's frustration. How Vidar and Terendal know each other has remained a secret the two have not spoken of. But whatever it is, the strength of their friendship is strong enough to endure their clashing personalities. A secret yet to be revealed. We will continue Session 2 of The Adventures of Arinor, son of Balis, Strider mode. As you saw with the intro, normally Strider mode is you do your character alone. You have a ranger that has better than normal starting stats. When I tried to do just the solo mode by itself, with just a single character, I did struggle. A version of doing it with a party of characters, and that, if you watched my first one, made it infinitely better. I was able to interact between the characters and have their dynamics play a part of it, like having Terendal be untrusting of Jari, and then Vidar being very trusting, seeing something in common in Jari that he sees himself, and Pippi being this beacon of hope as a young hobbit scholar aspiring to adventure out into the world and learn more. So that has made it much better. Now, where we are in Session 2, we are doing a troll hole if there ever was one. So if you plan on running this adventure, or more so if you plan on playing in this adventure, just be aware that there may be obviously spoilers that are going to come about. Your adventure may be very different than how mine turns out based on characters and what their reactions are to certain things. But the overall story is going to be spoiled for you, so I just want to put it up front. Spoilers ahead. Alright, where we picked up with Arinor, Terendal, Vidar, and Pippi, they are with Jari and Darmok, and they've just barely left Bree. They're only about a few days out. They had done one journey roll, and it was a shortcut that didn't go well. So it was a shortcut that turned out to be, if I remember correctly, it was a game path. And one of the things I mentioned in the first session that I'll just mention again is a lot of people will pick the character that has the best stats to do these skill checks. I don't like the term, I guess you would say, is metagaming, where I can go, oh, look, Arinor is the best at this particular skill. I'll have him roll. How I'm doing it is how I think logically it would be. So, for example, perhaps Arinor is better at going about looking for trails and stuff like that. But he's someone, his story is he's pretty much grew up in Lake Town and only just recently left Lake Town, because he senses this evil. And he just literally ran into Tarandal and Vidar as they were fighting goblins. So he's not well versed out in the world. Versus Tarandal, who I've alluded to is quite old despite her appearance, and a warden who has been out in the world looking for evil. It's more logical that she would kind of do those path kind of checks. So even though she's not great at it, skill-wise, she, to me, is the more logical choice, despite another character potentially being better. So if you're wondering why I'm having certain characters roll when they clearly have maybe no points or less points than another character, that's why I'm trying to do what I think logically story would tell, not what my character sheet shows as the best choice. And so Tarandal had basically spoken to Arinor saying, hey, there is something up with Jari. And Pippi, she wants to find out why Darmok is so sad, because Pippi is someone who has this upbeat personality. She always wants to find the good and the light, and if she sees someone sad, she wants to know why and see what she can do to make it better. And so last session, she had even tried to talk to Darmok, but I had rolled on the telling table and she actually got spotted. Jari actually kind of made a scene and kind of stopped that conversation from happening. And so Darmok did not tell the story he wants to tell because he knows he's being watched by Jari, and there's a reason he's hiding all of this. And so we start this session with Arinor approaching Jari saying, so tell me about this treasure you seek. You made brief mention of it when we were in Bree. However, you seem quite eager to share this treasure, which is odd if it's such a cherished heirloom. So tell me, what is it about this treasure? At that moment, Jari basically tells this great tale of his great uncle by the name of Bori. He had this treasure and he was being chased by brigands, and he hid this treasure away somewhere according to the map, it kind of looks like hills or a mountain, and there's a door with some runes on it, and in front of this door was this lake. And at first, Jari thought maybe this is the fabled door that's in front of Moria, but there's no way that his uncle Bori would have taken this to Moria, so it has to be somewhere else where there's a mountain or hills near a body of water. And Jari explains that he was looking at old maps and trying to find out what he could, and he found an area that had what looked to be a fairly large lake. And so he went there just to see if maybe this is where his great uncle Bori had basically hidden this treasure. And while he was there, he stumbled upon some brigands who had been harassing Darmak. I keep saying Darmak or Darmok, so sorry if that name keeps becoming interchangeable as I speak. Darmok, same person, my apologies. And he explains that he ran into Darmok, who was being harassed by these brigands. He helped Darmok escape, and so Jari wants to go back and see if these brigands have anything to do with his great uncle's treasure, and Darmok just wants to get his possessions back. These brigands have Darmok's valuables. Darmok was traveling from Londier, and these brigands waylaid him. He was just trying to start a fresh start, so now he has nothing. At least that's the story that Jari's telling. And with this, Arinor kind of eyes Darmok, who is sitting at the campfire basically using a stick to kind of poke at the flames and kind of send ash into the sky. He's not making eye contact, which you would think he would, as someone who's being spoken about. He might rise up and say something about the brigands, but he makes no words, his eyes reflecting the fire. So because I've already had Arinor and Pippi already tried to make conversation with Darmok, I'm going to say that's all they can really do today. They've kind of learned that this story from Jari and maybe this sort of potentially truth about Darmok and how he and Jari met. So I'm going to say that there's no other opportunity on day one for them to try to engage with Darmok and Jari. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do another journey roll and hope that the dice this session treat me better than they did last session. So we're going to go on the journey roll here. That is in Strider mode. Sorry if you can hear the paper. I printed it out and stapled it to make it a nice little book. So we're going to roll a single feat dice. We're going to do this journey. So we got a 4, which is a mishap. If the roll fails, add 1 day to the length of the journey and gain 1 additional fatigue. This one is already going to grant 2 fatigue. So now we're going to roll on the mishap table to see which one it is. And for the mishap table, we are going to roll the success dice, which is the d6, and we get a 5. For the mishap, a 5 is rough terrain. And then we need to roll an explore check. So again, I am going to have Terendal be our scout who's moving ahead of us. And just out of curiosity, I'm going to see who actually is the best at explore. Okay, Arinor has 1 box in explore. Oh boy. Terendal has no check marks in explore. Her number to reach, her target number, is at least considerably lower than Arinor's. So that's actually kind of beneficial. She has no dots in it, but at least her target number is lower. Vidar has 2 dots in it, but his target number is 1 higher than Terendal. But because he would have 2 dices rolled versus none, probably make it a better success. And Pippi has no dice roll in it. And since Terendal has no point in it, I am going to expend another hope, because without it, it's pretty much an automatic failure. So we're going to try to expend a hope, and so we'll roll a feat dice and a success dice. And there is hope for this. Hey, oh, are you kidding me? The dice are going to treat me exactly how they did last time. So on the feat dice, rolled a 9, and on the success dice, I rolled a 5, which is 14. However, Terendal's target number is 15, so it will fail. So what will happen is, our rough terrain, we are going to get 3 fatigue. That is not good. So as we're kind of trying to follow this path that was the failed shortcut from before, and we hit some rough terrain, Terendal tries to find way around it, but the rough terrain, especially with Darmok, who isn't all that great at being physical, he's slowing us down. Jari's mules are also slowing us down as well, so that is going to be the reason for our fatigue. We're constantly having to stop and constantly having to find a different path, because the path that we're finding doesn't work out for the mules, so we're having to backtrack at times and find a more suitable path for the mules to actually traverse. We'll move ourselves on the map. That following journey, as we stop and we set up camp, I've used Arinor and Terendal quite a bit. I'm going to actually use Vidar this time. Vidar didn't get a lot of airplay other than saying he was great with Jari. During that time that we're actually traveling through the difficult terrain and backtracking several times, Arinor will actually pull Vidar aside and say, "I understand that you are bonded with Jari, but Terendal thinks that there is something up." And Vidar, who is, again, 100% behind Jari, just says, "Yeah, well, she always thinks something's up with everyone." And Arinor will say, "Yeah, but there's something odd about the fact that he wants to share his wealth. It seems like an easy way to lure adventurers. I don't know if this is some kind of ambush, if perhaps he is in league with these brigands he proclaims that he saved Darmok from. It does not seem like Darmok is in league, though. If you look, there's something that bothers that man." And Vidar kind of looks at Darmok and he goes, "Well, yeah, no offense to you, but he is a human, and humans are not nearly as durable as a dwarf or an elf. Oddly enough, though, I wouldn't have thought that Pippi would be doing as well as she is." And Vidar looks to Pippi, and she is beaming with smiles and pride, and she is once again cooking food as the night begins to settle down. Terendal will approach Pippi and try to get Pippi to once again speak with Darmok. He seemed almost willing to speak to her had it not been for Jari's interference last time. So Vidar will say, "Well, you know, as a dwarf, I understand his plight of trying to find his family heirloom." And Arinor will say, "Well, is there anything unusual of the fact that a dwarf would flee with treasure? Like, what kind of treasure would it be that he could split that a dwarf could carry on his own?" And to this, Vidar kind of pauses and thinks about it. It's true. There's no way this dwarf, this great uncle Bori, could have fled with bags of gold and managed to escape. It would have had to have been like a single item. And there's no way, if it is a single item, he would sell this to get gold to split with these heroes who are helping him track this one item. So let's see if this can convince Vidar. We're going to roll on the telling table. I'm trying to use the telling table and the other tables as much as I can. But let's see if this logic kind of helps Vidar kind of see the truth that maybe there is something up with Jari. Since it's Arinor explaining this and that he's saying there's no way that this great uncle Bori carried like a sack of gold and was fleeing from brigands, that this is probably just a single item, I'm going to say that the probability that Vidar is going to believe him seems likely, which means I have to roll a feat dice and roll a 4 or higher. So let's see how this goes. Are you kidding me? Okay. I actually rolled a 1 on the feat dice. That is ridiculous. I had to double check to make sure that's... Oh, wait. Hold on. That is not a 1. That's a 7. Okay. That is a 7. I totally thought that was a 1. Okay, and we just need to get 6 or higher. So Vidar is actually starting to see Arinor's point. And Vidar now thinks he has maybe some more probing questions. Vidar approaches Jari and says, "You know, dwarves, we are proudful of our family. Can you tell me more about your great Uncle Bori?" And Jari kind of like looks a little bit shaken. He kind of like itches his head. He probably did not think that A, he was gonna, employ a dwarf who might ask him this kind of question, and B, he was pretty convinced that he had Vidar, on his side, and he's ill prepared to come up with a further backstory about his great uncle Bori. And so Jari quickly stammers over his words. He's really good at lying. He's exceptional at it. But it is very clear that the story he begins to tell almost begins to echo the story of Thorin. Vidar continues to probe further, asking Jari more and more questions, and Jari quickly starts to find a way to change the subject as he begins to look at Darmok and say, "Hey, Darmok, you look really tired, maybe we should rest." Darmok, seeing that Jari looks a little bit uncomfortable, seems to kind of like gain a little bit of strength and courage. Terendal kind of sees Jari kind of unraveling a little bit and trying to recover from what is clearly a lie. He can tell that he's losing Vidar as an ally. And so Terendal kind of steps in and says, "Yeah, please tell me about your great uncle Bori and his connection to Thorin. For I've traveled these lands far and wide. And long before Thorin went on this adventure with Bilbo Baggins, I actually knew Thorin." She's throwing that in there to continue to throw off Jari. She knows and she can see that wedge in his armor, and as someone who is a warden, they look for that crack in the armor, and that's what they'll expose when they attack. And she is using that to basically make Jari feel more uncomfortable. As this happens and Jari is trying to struggle and kind of like make light of it, and he's kind of laughing, saying, "Oh, I'm not even sure if it's true. That's just something that, my great uncle Bori used to tell me all kinds of stories." And he's trying to just backpedal a little bit once he sees that Vidar kind of knows about Thorin, and then Terendal is saying that she knows of Thorin. And Pippi takes this opportunity to slide over to Darmok and sit next to him. And as he's kind of poking the fire, she takes a pan and basically starts cooking next to Darmok. And keeping her voice low, she whispers and she says, "I can't help but notice that you've been very sad this whole time since we've left Bree. The more that we travel, you look sadder and sadder. I don't like to see people sad. If there's a story you need to tell, a burden which you need to unleash from your heart, I'm here to listen to it. I'm here to help." And Darmok kind of looks at her, he feels the sting of tears in his eyes because Pippi is not doing it to get information. Vidar and Terendal and Arinor are clearly poking at Jari because they sense a lie, but Pippi, she doesn't know how to lie. She's just someone who's sincere and honest, and her words come from the heart. And this begins to make Darmok kind of like feel really bad because he knows what he's doing and he knows what the plan is. And to be cared for and to be asked about in such a sincere and deep way, he might share a little bit more. And so we're going to roll on the telling table. And I think because Pippi, let's do this to keep some more rolls going. I am going to have Pippi, she's going to try to persuade Darmok to kind of tell his story. And she has 2 success dice in this, so that is good. We have a feat dice and 2 success dice. And her target number is 14. Yeesh. All right. We did not. Yeah, this I don't know what it is about Strider mode, but it is not being nice to me. So the feat dice rolled a 4, and then the success dice rolled a 4 and a 1, which is a total of 9, and her target number is 14. So while she is being sincere, I'm going to say that impacts the likelihood of the telling. So before, I was going to say that it was certain because she is being completely sincere, but they are still sitting at the campfire. There is a good chance that Jari could still overhear him, even though he's trying to whisper, and the others are trying to talk loudly to give Pippi this opportunity to learn more. Darmak is still very, very nervous. We've only traveled a few days out of Bree. He's not completely succumbed to like the desperation of he should confess everything. So I'm going to say it went from certain to middling, which means I need to roll a 6 or greater on the feat die to see if he will share a little bit more. And that is a 2. So Darmak he wants to say more. It's clear. Pippi can see it in his eyes. But Darmak, he's too afraid. Now that all of this is coming out and Jari's even feeling the pressure, his eyes are scanning around very nervously. He's looking at Darmak to make sure that Darmak doesn't cave, as Jari continues to try to hide this. Also, to note, I did change Darmak's backstory because in the book it says, you can tell from his garb and his clothing that he comes from beyond Dunland, from the border of Gondor's western marches. However, I know of something that is in this adventure that in my own version of the game, when I ran it for 2 people, I had an NPC basically say, hey, I have family in Londier, which is why I mentioned Londier earlier, so that when that thing happens, I can easily make this next quest lead towards Londier. So because he is reluctant to tell even more of the story, he's going to give a version of the story that is actually still a lie, but he basically explains that he and his kinsfolk, they had left the south down by Londier and they had traveled north looking to start a new beginning. Someone by the name of Johan had basically bought them out of their farm and made life very, very difficult for them. So they basically took what they had left for possessions, and several of them just traveled north in hopes of starting a new beginning. However, the caravan was attacked by brigands, just like Jari said, and that in the chaos of it all, only Darmak had managed to escape. He's not even sure if his other kinsfolk are prisoners, or, if these other farmers are being held captive, or what their situation is. He just knows that in the confusion when Jari showed up and all this chaos happened, that they were able to flee. And Pippi, who is a hobbit and she is curious, she's trying to learn more about the world, so she kind of asks him about Londier and this whole thing with Johan. And Darmak basically explains, yeah, Johan is this businessman, Queen Numenay sits on the throne, but Johan kind of runs everything else. The queen is just on the throne, and Johan basically helps people whose farms get into any kind of financial trouble. However, the interest and payback is so high that farmers just never have a chance to actually ever pay it back. So Johan eventually just buys out the farm, and the families end up just working for Johan as he purchases more and more farms around Londier. And so Darmak and his family and a couple other farmers had all basically banded together and said, hey, we're just going to leave Londier and just go up north and just try to find a new beginning. And that's when these brigands had attacked up in this area. And Pippi, who's kind of listening to this, she kind of looks at Jari and kind of looks at Darmak, and she can tell Darmak is clearly not a fighter. He is, by his cloth and his manner, his build, he's just someone that isn't a fighter. And so how Darmak could have escaped brigands, she kind of looks at Jari, and Jari also kind of doesn't look like someone who's just well versed at combat. He clearly has a few daggers, one on his belt, one strapped to his boot, but there are no cuts, no gashes, no signs that either of them would have fought brigands anytime soon, and certainly not within a couple of days when they arrived at Bree, proclaiming they needed help to fight some brigands and free Darmak's fellow farmers and family, but also potentially these brigands are guarding the very treasure that Jari is looking for. And so when Pippi kind of sees this, she kind of pauses and looks at Darmak and says, how did you escape? Neither one of you really looked like you could have fought your way out. And at this, Darmak suddenly realizes he wasn't ready to explain how they got away, only that they did get away. And so I am gonna have just keep dice rolling and see if the freaking dice treat me any nicer. I was gonna see if I should make Pippi roll a awareness or insight to see if she can tell that Darmok is kind of struggling to come up with a truth. And I think insight is the better one, because she's trying to insight him and see if he's telling the truth rather than being aware of something that is around. And thankfully her insight is actually better. Her target number is only 14 and her insight has 2. Her awareness also has 2, but her target number is considerably higher. So actually it is going to be much better that we go for insight anyway. So let us roll. It's going to be 1 feat dice and 2 success dice, and we need to get higher than a 14 to see if Pippi can tell that something is up with Darmak's tail. Are you freaking kidding me? So the feat dice rolled a 1. One of the success dice rolled a 1. The other success dice rolled a 3, which is a grand total of 5, nowhere near the 14. Pippi, not really having ever dealt with humans, she's only barely begun her adventure going out beyond. She can tell Darmak is holding something back, but she, as someone who never lies herself, she's just not used to anyone lying. Like, lying is something that is so foreign to her that it's just not a concept that she understands. So unfortunately, her insight into trying to figure out what Darmak is kind of stammering over and why he's trying to do it kind of just goes over her head. She would never believe that anyone would lie. There's no reason to lie. Like, why wouldn't you tell the truth that, maybe your family's in great jeopardy and we're heading towards a trap and I just want to tell you that. But all of that just goes right over Pippi's head. And maybe being a hobbit, there's a short joke there to be had. But yeah, her insight fails her. Again, lying being so foreign to her as someone who doesn't lie herself. All right, we are going to then, since we're getting nowhere, we're trying to figure out this tale. I have a bad feeling that my company of heroes are going to head right into a trap with never discovering the truth. But if that happens, I have ideas. I am an experienced DM, and improvising is a skill that I've learned very, very well. I think my 2 players in my One Ring game would probably agree with me. There's a lot that I've improvised that has shocked them as well. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to do another travel roll, and this is the last night. So on the last night, as the travelers approach the western hills, Jari leads the company to a sheltered spot. The trail winds its way up a steep-sided hillock, one of the westernmost of the hills. At the top are a few tumbled stones that mark the watchtower that once stood here. Long ago, there was a beacon of fire here, signaling along the line of the hills from the road to Fornost. He points east and tells the party that yonder lies the hidden valley of Marigold, where the brigands are and where he thinks his uncle hid this treasure. Jari insists that this is a good place to camp and suggests that lighting a fire here, claiming that no one will see it from down below. In truth, Jari intends to signal the trolls that dinner is coming tomorrow. Before we get there, let's do another journey roll to get there. I just made us skip right ahead. Let's do a journey roll first so we can keep rolling on the table, and then we'll determine whether or not we light that fire. So journey roll is going to be the feat dice. Hey, a 10. A 10 is good. A 10 is a chance meeting. If the roll succeeds, no fatigue is gained, and you may improvise an encounter favoring your player hero. This might be exactly what I need right now. Maybe this is why the dice are telling the story for me. Maybe this is why it's been going so poorly, because now, right before that last night, before we arrive at that tower, we can hopefully get a favored thing to actually happen. So let's roll. Let's see what the chance meeting is. All right, we're going to roll a d6 or a success dice to see what our chance meeting is. Ooh, we got a 6. We got a feed, a Tengwar symbol. Chance meeting with a 6. Auspicious gathering, a noteworthy encounter. Ooh, what are we going to do for a noteworthy encounter? All right, so we're arriving at, let's think about this. We're arriving at a hill that used to be a watchtower. So a noteworthy encounter there might be like a Ranger of the North. So maybe a Ranger of the North is there, and it should be noteworthy. So we're going to go with none other than the very mode that this game is named after. We are going to go with Strider. So Strider is up on this hill. He actually happens to be there kind of in the dark when we arrive at this hill. And as Jari is speaking, Strider steps out of the shadow, basically melting out of the shadow, kind of like just one with the shadow as he just comes out, and he goes, "Strange to have travelers this far." And this sets Jari just kind of like jumping as he kind of like looks and sees Strider and recognizes a ranger, and now wonders, is Strider here because he knows about the trolls? And so this has Jari unnerved. Jari is now worried that this whole thing that he's been setting up has just unraveled. And so now Darmok, who now sees Strider, suddenly feels like maybe this Ranger of the North has taken care of the trolls. Maybe my family is saved. And so this is the first time that now Jari looks distraught. Darmok actually looks happy. And so Strider will be there to say, it is strange to see travelers this far. And Arinor will say, "Hello, Ranger of the North. We are here to help this dwarf here. His name is Jari. He reports that there are brigands here that have attacked this young man's family." And Strider will look from Jari to Darmok, and Strider, who visits Bree off and on, he knows all about Jari. Jari has an ill reputation of basically he goes into Bree, he kind of loudmouths everything, and he's like this smarmy salesperson kind of thing, has people buy him drinks, and then he just departs, leaving the people with the tab. Strider knows that, Jari is someone who is very mischievous, someone who isn't honest. And as he looks at Darmok and hears this story about brigands, Strider kind of pauses and says, "I can tell by your accent. You're from Lake Town. I would like a word with you." And Arinor kind of like looks around, and Turandal nods her head emphatically, like, "Go talk to him. I'll keep Jari busy." And so Turandal basically turns on Jari and says, "What do you think?" And Jari's like, we should light a fire. And he's trying to do this again to signal the trolls that food is coming, but now he's not even certain if the trolls are there. And so while Turandal is basically talking to Jari, Strider walks off with Arinor and basically says, "I will tell you something. That dwarf over there is lying to you. There is no evidence of any brigands in this area. What I have found is footprints that belong to trolls. If I were you, be wary of what this Jari tells you. You're not headed for brigands. You're headed for trolls." And with this, Arinor kind of gets angry. This is all a trap, and this explains why Darmok perhaps was so distraught. He's not in on this. There's a reason that Darmok is being blackmailed. And so Arinor kind of looks at Strider and says, "Will you aid us in our quest then?" And Strider says, "Unfortunately, business calls me elsewhere. You go in with knowledge, and that knowledge will help you." And with that, Strider basically kind of slides into the shadows. And with that information, Arinor spins on his heels and marches back to camp and says, "Jari, a word with you now!" And that is where we'll stop this session here, with a nice little cliffhanger right before we head into the actual troll hole adventure. I love that rolled out that way, that it was the chance meeting and it was like a significant meeting. So freaking great that my dice were being so mean to me all the way up to that point, and it actually made for a really cool moment that my characters interacted with Strider himself. So alright, we'll wrap this up. I'll edit it up and make it nice and clean and do some music in here. Thank you for checking it out. If you like it, please click a like down there and drop a comment. Check out the other ones that I've done for this Strider mode. If you just landed on this second episode, you're probably very confused. Jump into the first one. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I enjoyed this. Pretty soon we'll get into combat, I assume, because now the company knows what lies ahead.